we all know, we've all experienced, like sometimes we ignore our body so much that our body gets sick, right? Like
Mm-hmm.
our bodies speak to us. And breath work is such a potent medicinal time to go, all right, I'm here and I'm listening.
All right, Caroline, I am so excited to jump in with you. I know you and I connected in a Facebook group with our coach, James Wedmore, a couple months back, probably now.
Mm-hmm.
And I was looking for people that were in San Diego area that wanted to come and be a part of my retreat and posted in there. And you and I connected and then we were like, oh my gosh, this is so great. Like we can continue to collaborate and there's so many different things we can do together. I love meeting people in person. And I think it's so helpful. So, but also virtually. And the fact that we're kind of in both is amazing. So I'm so excited, one, to have you here on the podcast, and also two, to have you at our retreat coming up next week, which is going to be so amazing and all of those things. So before we dive into talking all about breath work and what it is and how it supports the body and what benefits people can gain from it, from actually integrating it into their life, not just in their business, but in like all areas of life. Before we do that, do you want to share a little bit about who you are and how you got into breath work and a little bit about your story?
Yeah, absolutely. First of all, thank you for having me on the podcast. Thank you for inviting me on the retreat. I'm super stoked about it. I'm really, really excited. So I'm Caroline. I am a breathwork facilitator, but I do all of this other stuff too. And I think one way that I like to introduce myself is that I am a recovering addict to hustle and grind culture.
Mm,
Like super addicted to that kind of culture, especially like from college all the way up into like my recent adulthood, actually like last 10 years. And breathwork has really supported me in healing from that. And I do a whole lot of other stuff too. Like I haven't like released entirely like my addiction to hustle and grind culture, still trying to do all the things. And so I'm a playwright, I'm a writer, I'm a mom, which is like one of the ways that I feel really connected to you, even in spite of like not talking for a long time. I'm always like, oh, I'm really excited because this is another mom doing the thing, like getting at it, like pursuing our dreams. And I think a lot about, there's somebody who has an account like Revolution from Home, like our
mm,
roles as mothers are so integral to society at large. Like we can
mhm.
look at what's happening in the house, and most often we can see its mirror in the society as a whole. And so the work that you do with moms is like extraordinary, is important. I resonate with it. And when I think about breath work and motherhood simultaneously, I'm like, ooh, there's such juice there. There's so much richness there. Like what it would be like for mothers to slow down and really, really listen to our hearts, what
Mhm.
kind of fullness we could bring to our marriages and our children and our community and our friendships and our workplaces. What kind of
Mm.
like wholeness we could bring to those places if we slowed down enough to be really, really in touch with ourselves and the breath that is constantly supporting us.
Mhm. Oh my goodness. Okay, this is going to be so amazing. And I just want to highlight, I think that so in the business world, there is this idea that you have to niche down, right? You niche down, whatever you want to say, however you want to say it. You have to get very specific, very focused, and that the more specific that you get and the more isolated into one thing, the more successful your business is. And so I think as entrepreneurs, we get this idea that we cannot be multi-passionate and that
Mm.
there's this idea that like we are these people that do very dynamic things. And I will say that I meet entrepreneur after entrepreneur who's like, I do all the things, right? Like I'm a photographer and I'm the playwright and I'm the business owner. I'm the breathwork coordinator. I'm a mom. I'm like all over the place. And I think that that's what makes it beautiful is that we are these like multifaceted, multidimensional people. And we bring that to areas and we can laser in on helping people get results in one specific area. But the way we do that is bringing all of those other pieces to us of us into that one area. And I think that that's what makes the biggest results. So I just wanted to highlight that too, because I think sometimes we do think like, how do we choose one? How do we
Mm-hmm.
narrow in on one? When in reality, we don't have to. We can bring all of those pieces and parts of us, and all those pieces and parts of us make us feel whole and they make us feel alive and they make us feel excited. And so anyway, that's a whole other conversation we could get on, but I am so excited to talk about breathwork. So I know I shared my story with you. The first time I did breathwork was in a I think it was a program that I actually bought and it wasn't live. It was a pre-recorded program. So like each day it was like, I don't know, like 30 days to your highest vibration or something along those lines. And each day was a different audio training, different meditation, a different exercise, like something for me to do every single day. And one of them was a breathwork session. And so I go out into my backyard and I lay out on the concrete. This is like lay out in the concrete in my backyard, put in my earbuds and turn on this breathwork session. No idea what I'm getting myself into. No idea what it's about. I think I'm just going to lay in, like have this meditative experience out in my backyard, let alone I experience like full body, like rigor. It's like tight and tense. And I'm like feeling these tingling things from my head to toe. And like the whole experience, I like panicked in that moment. And my body, because the way my body was feeling, and then I didn't expect it. And I was fighting it. And I was like trying not to let it happen. I'm like, oh my gosh, there's something going wrong. Like my body's not doing right. Like it was this whole experience that I didn't want to do breath work ever again. And I remember like kept hearing about it and kept hearing people say like breathwork has changed everything for me. Breathwork has made such an impact. Like breathwork, oh my gosh, breathwork this. And I was like, not going to do it, not going to go there, not going to be a part of that. And then over the last couple of years, I've had a couple of other experiences that went much better. And then even now knowing like when I go into a breathwork session, I have to be very cognizant and very mindful of this is the expectation. My role in this is to release the control versus trying to hold the control. And so it's a much different experience for me now. And now I've stepped into this place of really honoring and knowing and like embracing the breath work. So I would just love, that was a whole like random story, but I just wanted to give that backstory for people to know, like, if you've done breath work and you're in that boat of like, oh my gosh, I'm never doing that again. Like, no, I've been there and come out. And then also that this whole conversation that we're going to have is going to help give people a little bit more insight into what it is, how it works, what it's about, so that you can enter it into a little bit more awareness than me going into it blind and feeling totally blindsided by it. So tell us a little bit right out of the gate, like, what is breath work? Why are we hearing so much buzz about it lately? And why are more people turning to breath work?
Okay, so many juicy things to latch onto and everything that you shared. Well, first of all, like I want to address like your very first experience, because that happens to people sometimes, right? A question that I like to talk to people about even before I start to facilitate is like the difference between danger and discomfort, and really like feeling into that in our bodies, like feeling into that about like when we are inside our practice, like knowing that when we are inside a breathwork session, we are 100% in control the entire time. Like it's us and our breath, and we can slow down. We don't have to listen to whatever. Like when I'm facilitating for people, I always say like everything I say is an invitation. Like you are in charge. You are the one putting your foot on the gas pedal right now. And I think sometimes it's not framed very properly, because sometimes people get to these experiences where it can get radically intense, and then you're facing things that you didn't expect, and sensations are coming up in your body that you're like, ooh, where did that come from? And it could feel massively dangerous because it feels so uncomfortable. But then at the end of that session, you came out of that, you were feeling all of those things, and then you were okay, and you ended up going back into a session again. So I think it's important to really kind of feel into, is this dangerous or is this uncomfortable? Because that question, even outside of breathwork practice as a whole, like in life as an entrepreneur, in the work that we do in our careers, even like in our roles as mothers, like there's some times that I'm like, we have these conversations about risky play, like, ooh, is that dangerous? Is that uncomfortable? Like, am I just uncomfortable right now? She's climbing that thing, like, or is that actually something I got to step into right now? Because we halt our growth. We halt our growth when we are not able to withstand discomfort. So I think that's really important. For me, I've had so many different sessions where I felt really, really uncomfortable as well. But my very, very first session, actually, was I had this session with my teacher, and I ended up doing all of my training through his program, him and his wife, Dr. Maura Moynihan. Anyway, so the very first session that I experienced, I was laying there, and then I got to this space where a young version of me came up to me, and this like little Caroline came up to me, and she was like, "Do you love me?" And I said, "Of course I love you. Why would you ask me that?" And she said, "Well, then why do you keep me so busy all the time? I never have time to play. And why are you talk to me so mean? Why are you always yelling?" And from that session, from just that like experience, I threw away my wild planner that was like super, super, super full all the time. People in my life would make fun of me of how many post-its were sticking out of this thing all the time. And the second thing is I made a pact with myself that I would never speak to myself in a way that I wouldn't speak to a young child. So every time something comes up in my head that's like, "Oh, why didn't you do that? You should blah, blah, blah." I'm like, "Ooh, I would never say that to a young child. Like that voice is not mine. I'm letting that go. I'm coming back to my center. I'm going to be who I am, who I really, really am." So I had this wildly transformative very first session. And from that place, I was like, "Ooh, I got to learn everything there is to know about this practice. I need to understand this." So at the time, I didn't have a business. I was a high school English teacher, and I went to like these sessions, and people are like, "Oh, so what do you do? Like, why are you here?" And I was like, "I don't know why I'm here. I'm just here because I felt the pull. I felt the pull of what this is." And I followed the pull. I followed the impulses, and it led me to this place where I feel so, so passionate about breathwork now. I facilitate every Saturday. I facilitate for people in person and online. And I've learned so much from the breath. And so there are all kinds of sessions. And the particular practice that I do is revelation breathwork. And I know that you all listeners have heard a little bit about Wim Hof. There's so many different kinds of breathwork, right? We have pranayama. Like breath has always been around. Breath has been around as long as life has been around. So we have lots of different modalities with breathwork, the same way we have lots of different kinds of life forms on our planet. So there are many different kind of flavors of what breathwork is and what it feels like and what can come up for us. And even within those different flavors, I can do the same kind of breathwork session and have radically different experiences from one session to another. So I've had sessions that were super relaxing to my body where I came out of it and I was like, "Oh, I just feel really relaxed." And it was exactly what my body needed at that time and what I needed at that time. And I've had sessions where I'm like weeping, crying, trying to figure out like what's happening to me in my life. Am I where I'm supposed to be? Of course I'm where I'm supposed to be. Like this like wild experience, like here and there in different planes with the same exact kind of practice. So I think another thing I've learned from that is like we can experience the same things, but we never experience the same thing. Like because we're always different every single time we approach something, every single time we come to a practice, whatever it is, like a yoga, breathwork practice, like we're never doing the same thing twice. We're always a little different. And that's a little bit about my entry to breathwork. But to address the question, like what is breathwork? The type of breath work I do is revelation breath work. So it's calm. It's unlike Wim Hof. Wim Hof can be very, very energizing. This one is a little bit more like your inner body. And I think the way I like to talk about it is like it gives us something for our conscious mind to focus on, that breath, that filling up our belly, the chest breath on top, and exhaling, so that our bodies and our heart have space to speak to us. Like we have so much conditioning that we have a bias toward our minds in most situations, like the way that we go to school, the way we're always like taking our thoughts so seriously. And what would happen if we like paused a little bit to listen to the wisdom of our hearts, to listen to the wisdom of our bodies? Like we all know, we've all experienced, like sometimes we ignore our body so much that our body gets sick, right? Like our bodies speak to us, and breathwork is such a potent medicinal time to go, "All right, I'm here and I'm listening."
Oh, I love that. And I'm glad you kind of talked about that, because I didn't realize like that breathwork does have different modalities and different styles and like you said, flavors. I didn't realize that. I kind of thought like, oh, breathwork is breathwork and it's like universal, but it does make sense that there are different styles and there's different intents and there's different techniques and different things like that make such a huge difference. And that which one you're doing also makes a difference in how you're using it and what your intention is and what you're hoping to gain from it and all those. So, okay, let's dive in a little bit. Like, why would somebody want to practice breath work, right? Like, we hear about it, we hear people talking about it. And I will say, when I dove into it, it was all like, I'm just experimenting because somebody told me to do it. Like, somebody told me to do it. And like, even then somebody else told me down the road, like somebody said, oh, you should do breath work. You should do breath work. So I'm just kind of curious, like from your perspective, why would somebody want to do breath work? What are those benefits that somebody, I know you talked about like the grounding and listening to your body and stuff, like what are those outcomes that somebody could expect from having a breathwork practice, I guess?
It's so funny that you asked this question, because when you were saying earlier about like the expectation to niche down, I struggle with this question sometimes, because I feel like breathwork is for everybody. Like everybody can take something from breathwork, which I'm sure is like what most people experience about their offerings, right? Like everybody can experience something from this offering. And I think about that with breathwork, and in my attempts over the years to like try to niche down, like who is this really for? What are they getting from this? And I think that you're right. Like there's all these different flavors. Like I facilitate different from my teachers. Like I have a specific style. I have a specific way that I like to craft the session and meditate our way into it. But in terms of what you get out of it, this is like the most challenging thing, because what people get out of sessions is so different. What people pull out of even the same exact session can be really different. I facilitated for a couple women a few weeks ago, and one of them had this like super powerful transformative session where she was seeing a loved one who had passed away, like working with her chat, all of these things. And the same exact session, like her friend who was there as well had just like this very calm, floaty session where she just was like really relaxed. The thing I always say about breathwork is like whatever is happening is what you need. So whatever happens, you're always like, you can't do it wrong. You can't do it wrong. Like the breath doesn't do it wrong. Like we can't breathe incorrectly, and we're always listening to our bodies, and it's just an opportunity to listen to our bodies. But what people pull out of it, I think, in the most general sense, is like that connection to the body, some time to understand and really listen to all of the other parts of ourselves beyond our thoughts that are trying to communicate. And I think the third thing is this connection to something bigger than your individual self. And even inside the individual self, like even for anyone who doesn't have like a spiritual practice or anything, like there is something that wants you breathing. Like if it's the atoms of the universe or whatever it is, like there's something that is like continuously giving you breath over and over again, even when you don't ask for it, even when you're not saying thank you for it, even when you are tired, even when you're angry, you're pissed off, even when you're asleep. There is something somewhere, somehow, that is like, I want you to be breathing because I want you alive, because I want you to thrive and experience this gift called life. And I think for me, that's been the ultimate lesson of the breath, is like, if I slow down enough to notice that, then there's something for me in this moment. There's something for me to learn. There's something for me to experience. And I'm supposed to be right here. If I wasn't, I wouldn't be breathing anymore.
Yeah. Oh my goodness. It's so powerful. And I love like, even just like talking about like, I think so many people are feeling disconnected. And I know people ask me a lot, like I tend to attract a lot of people who have ADHD and people that come to me. And I've said, I think even regardless if you have ADHD or not, I feel like our society is very overstimulated. And a lot of people probably feel like they have ADHD when clinically they may not, just because as a society as a whole, we are all overstimulated. And so we all have ADHD like symptoms, and we feel like we're scattered all the time, and we feel like we can't focus, and we feel very distracted, and we feel all these things. And I think so much of it is this ability to eliminate the distractions and really hone in. And I think listening to our body. And I think that's part of why so many people are overwhelmed and distracted and feeling overload and sensory overwhelm and feeling very dysregulated biologically, but they don't really know that that's what's happening. They don't really understand that that's what's happening inside their body until they stop and kind of listen to it and tune in and create that space. And even just for that, like creating the space to listen and eliminate the noise, I think is so much of kind of how you're talking about how this like brings it together. It eliminates the noise and allows us to tap into something bigger than just the distractions of our everyday, I guess, in a sense,
Yeah.
right?
I think like too, I guess that's another place that I think about like for people who are interested in breathwork. I think for me, like that slowing down, like the overstimulation of society, like the place that I was first kind of drawn to was meditation. And
Mm-hmm.
meditation was hard. It was hard. Like I was
Yeah.
like, 5 minutes. It's only been 2 minutes since I've been sitting here with my eyes closed. Like it felt so overwhelming to try to slow down that much. And I now have like a very rich meditation practice. But the gateway for me was a breathwork practice because then there was something for me to concentrate on. Like I was concentrating on that breathing versus like
Mm-hmm.
sitting there and going, am I done? Am I done?
Mm-hmm.
The timer, am I done? And breathwork just like allowed me to drop in, have something to focus on so that I could listen. When we think about how overstimulated our society is and like what it would take to get back to center, to experience stillness as a state of wonder, like that is a really large jump. When you talk about the stimulation too, it's interesting. Like I've been like we don't let our daughter is almost 2 years old. She'll be two next month. But I've been really, really critical about TV, right? As most
Yeah.
of us have been. But I was reading all of this stuff about like overstimulating cartoons and like figuring out like which ones are like the pace and the rhythm that she should be living life at. And so we tried this 19-minute thing yesterday that was recommended that I was reading about. And I just was like, I couldn't even pay attention to the story because it was so slow. Like the rhythm of it was so slow. And I was like, wow, I am massively overstimulated still because I can't
Yes.
pay attention to this cartoon. I don't know what that
Oh,
cartoon frog is saying. Like it was just so much. So that gave me another thing that I was like, okay, in my next breathwork practice, I'd like to slow down a little bit more. But when I think about how overstimulated our society is and what has become normal, and I think about my life when I was a kid,
mm-hmm.
like we have experienced so much change in our lifetime. Like I
Yeah.
remember, I don't know, like speaking of TV, one of my favorite things when I was younger was Xenon, Girl of the 21st Century. I just like really like that Disney Channel movie. And there was like these like little machines that they could like video communicate from like space to Earth. And I was like, wow, that's the future. Like they can video communicate with each other. And when as a kid, I was like, wow, that's like the most amazing thing. And today that's like, I mean, we're video communicating right now. Like today is normal. And
I
so to like
know.
slow down to experience how like one day from the past we were looking at this day as like wow that's the most amazing thing on the planet and we're
Mm-hmm.
experiencing it now. Like there's a sign that I have on the refrigerator like remember that one day you wished you were where you are right now. And if
Mm-hmm.
we breathwork allows us to slow down enough to notice that, to notice like
Yeah.
I look at all this magic, look at all this wonder, look at my capacity to feel, look at my capacity to hold both states of panic and calm simultaneously. Like, holy moly, my heart is strong and big and full.
Yeah. Oh my gosh. There's so much that we could unpack there. And I think, yeah, like you mentioned like the watching the show, like even me, I watch different trainings and things like that. And if I can't listen to them on 2 speed or like 1.5 speed, I almost like, I can't do it. Like it just goes so slow. I'm like, and even myself, like well, more so myself, when I'm like editing videos or editing something, I will listen to it on like 2x, 3x speed to be like, does this have the content that I want it to have? And
Mm-hmm.
is this where I want it to have? So that when I go back and listen to myself in normal speed, I'm like, oh my gosh, I am so slow. But it just goes to like when we are trained and conditioned to be operating in a certain pace and certain speed, it's a very strong challenge for us to slow it down. And I think that that's why so many people are going to the mindfulness and the meditation and the things is because they're realizing how fast their life is going and things are at
Mm-hmm.
such a high speed. And yet it's such a thing that it's a skill. It's a technique. It's something that this century of us, like this generation, it's something we've never had to have to do before, right? Like the world, the technology, the things, the way it is right now, never before has anybody had to live through this. And so it's something we're figuring it out as we go. And so to give ourselves grace that we are figuring this out as we go and figuring out how to navigate and keep ourselves grounded in a world that is so technologically advanced and so fast paced. And at the same time, knowing that that is a practice and a skill. And I love that you kind of brought in meditation, because that was going to be my question, is like, how and would you see it as different from meditation? And that it sounds like and I would probably agree that it gives you a lot more action, like not, that's probably not the right word, but it gives your brain something more to focus on. So it can help you bridge that gap between like being still with your thoughts, and also like your focus is on producing the breath in a particular rhythm. So it feels a little bit more, I don't know, like I think it's easier for people to focus. Would you kind of say the same thing?
Yeah, absolutely. Like when I think about the word breath work, like the breath is the work in the practice. Like there is like a sense of focus on like I'm breathing in this way, in this pattern. And so it's giving your mind something to do, something to concentrate on. And you're like, so I think like when I first began trying to meditate and building my meditation practice, like that was so hard because my brain is like, but I need to think about tomorrow and I need to make those plans and I need to answer that email from yesterday. Those things still come up with breathwork. Like the monkey mind still appears, and it takes me a little bit of time to like drop into that. I've gotten faster over the years, like continuing to like build my own practice. But I think for me, meditation was such a big leap. Again, I'm still a recovering addict to hustle and grind culture. So meditation for me was like a gigantic, like I sat there and I was like, wow, like I can't believe how slowly time is moving right now. Like, why is it moving so slowly? Versus in breathwork, I might feel that for the first song or two or something like that. And then I'm in it, like, and then I'm inside my body, and then I'm listening. And then I also know, like, this is a container of time, and I can like trust that at the end of this time, like at the end of this hour, like like the facilitator is going to pull me out of that space. And so I think that too, like the feeling of being held inside the practice, plus like the thing that I am focusing on is the breath, like it gives me something to do. Like our minds are so like we get scared when our minds don't have something to do. Like there's a fear that comes up for us, like, oh, I should be doing this, I should be doing that. Like my a good friend of mine is always telling me, you're shoulding all over yourself. Like when we're like constantly with the shoulds, but our brains are so good at like bringing us the should have beens, could have beens, would have beens over and over again. And all of those things draw us away from the present moment. I think something else about the breath landing in our bodies is that it is totally about the present moment. Like this breath right here, right now. Okay, now this one. And even though it's like both the same, both breathing, like one breath could lead you to like a little more relaxed state. Another breath could lead you to a state where you're like really grappling with some demons from the past or whatever it might be. But each breath is like like I'm inside my body, I'm inside my belly, I'm opening my heart, I'm releasing everything that no longer serves me. And that is constantly drawing us back to the present of this now moment.
I love it. So, okay, this is a totally selfish question because I've heard different things. And for somebody that's listening, that's like, okay, well, what does this look like? Are you going to get benefits out of one session? Is it something that you should be doing repeatedly? And if you're doing it repeatedly, I've heard suggestions that it could be something you're doing daily. The breathwork sessions that I've done have been like 45 minutes. And I'm like, that's not something I can do daily. Like my life I could, right? Going back to those coulds and shoulds, like I could, it's just not a huge priority for me at this current moment in time. So if it were something like, would you recommend it being done daily? Would you recommend it being done at a certain time frame? All of those types of things. And I've heard people talking about doing it in like more of a 10 to 15 minute session. So is that possible? Like just give me the ins and outs of there.
Okay, so there's definitely just like we have different ways that we sleep patterns, or different ways that we eat, like the same thing is with like our breathwork practice. I know people too who do it on the daily. I am not one of those people. I like if I'm talking to somebody, I usually recommend some integration time. Like I usually recommend some time to like be with it, like think about what you've learned, think about the things like you talked a little bit about a program that you were in earlier, like similarly to sometimes when we're inside programs, like we release one module at a time because then we need a little bit of time to integrate, to feel it all in, to take it all in, to process. And I think the same is true about breath work from my personal limited perspective. Like again, I know people who do it on the daily and they get a lot out of that and they're processing things like on a daily basis. I am not one of those people. I tend to recommend like 1 week at a time, like once a week, to like live your week, notice your week, like move back and then come back to the mat, come back to your practice. When you you talk about the 10 to 15 minutes on the daily, I also know people who do that. One thing that I do recommend happening on the daily is to just pause and notice the breath. So that doesn't take like laying down on a mat for 45 minutes or an hour or whatever that might be. That takes like, I'm going to take a pause right here and take 3 deep breaths and like recalibrate like whatever that larger power is for me this moment in time, and me and my breath and my body. And it only takes that to like recenter. It only takes that to come back to your breath, to come back to the center. What's funny is like when I first started training to become a facilitator, and I was teaching 9th grade English, the place that I did that the most was the bathroom. I would leave the classroom and I'd be like, I'm gonna go to the bathroom. I'm gonna take my time in the bathroom. Nobody's gonna bother me in the bathroom. And the same is true about being a mom right now. You know, like I go to the bathroom, I'm like, all right, I'm alone in the bathroom. I'm gonna take like 3 deep breaths here, come back to myself, then use the bathroom, wash my hands, and go back to my life. But it doesn't take like it doesn't take hours and hours of that time. Now, is the hour of breathwork practice or the 10 to 15 minutes or whatever that looks like for you, is that beneficial? I think absolutely. Coming back to the first question about do you get benefits out of a single session? Absolutely. I have been blessed to be able to facilitate for my mom. And my mom has done 1 session with me many years ago. We had this like really powerful exchange of energy. My mom saw her father, so my grandmother or my grandfather who had passed away years prior. My mom has not wanted or needed to come back to a session. She has like continued to carry that support and that energetic love with her from her day to day. So while I know people who have done like breathwork every day, I know people who did it once a week. That's my jam. And I also know people who have had like really transformative singular sessions that they're like, no, I'm carrying that with me for a long time. Maybe I'll do something in the future, but right now, like that was enough to like steer me in a direction that I feel good and happy about right now.
So powerful. I love that. So Carolene, I know we are going to hang out together very soon and facilitate in person with my retreat members. So I'm all excited about that. For those that are listening that would love to facilitate with you, if they are not coming to the retreat or not local, how would you recommend them doing that? And then I also would love to hear more about what you have coming up later this year that you'd like to share with.
Yeah, so I facilitate breathwork every Saturday, 8 a.m. Pacific Standard Time with Revelation Breathwork. You can DM me on Instagram at We Live in Eden, and I can give you a code and you could get a little discount. I could steer you that direction, but I'd love to see you Saturday mornings. Actually, right now is really fun and interesting, probably really cool to share with moms, is that I am facilitating a Mr. Rogers infused breathwork series for Revelation Breathwork at the moment. So pulling some lessons from Mr. Rogers and really deepening and thinking about what that looks like, what that means, what we're talking about when we talk about raising our children, and also recalibrating with ourselves and taking care of our own inner children so that we could show up the best that we can for the other people in our lives. So every Saturday, 8 a.m. Pacific, I would love to see you. And I do lots of different kinds of series with them, but that's the current one I'm doing right now. And in terms of what's happening for me in the rest of this year is I am hopefully releasing a book in November 2023. So November of this year, I'm really excited about it. I'm in like the 5th round of edits with my editor. The book is called Unassimilating, and really looking at the ways that our society tells us that we should be, and really pausing and going, is that what I want to be? Is that true for me? Is that how I want to live, how I want to be with the people around me, how I want to be in my workplace? Is that true? Do I buy into that for real? Or am I being convinced and programmed by something larger and outside of myself that I don't really actually have to listen to? So I'm really excited about that because, again, speaking to the moms, like I talk about that through the lens of birth and my birth experience with my first child. So I think about like, in order to get to a better world that works for all people, we have to do 2 things. We have to really see that world and envision that world with such clarity. And then we need to tolerate the discomfort between here and there. The same way a mom really understands the child in her belly, really feels and envisions what that child is going to look like, the room's going to look like, the house is going to look like. And then we tolerate the growing pains of our body and every contraction between here and there.
Yes. Oh, yes. All the things that change. Yeah, I was actually thinking, I'm like, gosh, could I be pregnant again? I'm like, I'm so glad I did it when I did and like the season of my life and things anyway, because it is such a growing experience. But so I know you mentioned already where people can find you on Instagram and things like that. So I would love for you guys to go over there and check in with her. Is there anything last that you want to make sure you highlight or any other last places you want people to follow up with you?
I think that's great. I have a website, carolenejoy.com, but Instagram is really the best bet for me. I mean, I guess like my last thoughts are to just like take some time today to pause, take a couple
Yeah.
deep breaths and come back to your home, come back to your center and your heart.
Love it. Love it. Thank you. Thank you so much for coming on. And I appreciate it. You guys definitely, if you're listening and you had any aha or any moment during this episode that you are walking away with, like go over that and share it with us. Take a screenshot, tag us on Instagram. We would love to shout you out and see that. And I hope you have a fabulous day.
Bye. Thank you. Thank you.